The wind in Dry Hollow never stopped screaming. It howled across the empty fields like a warning no one wanted to hear. Fences leaned crooked. Wells had gone dry. The river that once fed the valley was now nothing but cracked earth and old bones. People did not talk about hope anymore. They talked about surviving one more week. And when the black stallion appeared at the edge of town, even the wind seemed to quiet. Women pulled children indoors. Shopkeepers stepped back from their windows. Men stood stiff in the street, but did not reach for their guns. They already knew it would not matter. Silas Boone had arrived. He was not just big. He was built like the hills themselves, tall and wide, with shoulders that blocked the sun and a jaw that looked carved from stone. His coat was long and dark, dust clinging to it like dried blood, and his eyes were pale and empty, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply rode down the center of Dry Hollow like he owned it, because in a way, he did. Behind every dry well stood one name: Ezekiel Crowe. Crowe owned the dam miles upriver. Crowe owned the water, and Silas Boone was the hand that enforced it. From the second-floor window of the small white church, Grace Whitmore watched him. Her fingers pressed against the glass. Her breath fogged the pain. She did not look away. Grace was 20 years old. Her hair was the color of wheat before harvest, always tied back neat and proper. Her dresses were simple, pale, modest. Her father made sure of that. She was known in town as the preacher's girl, quiet, pure, untouched. But her blue eyes held something fierce. And her father, Reverend Samuel Whitmore, sat at his desk behind her, Bible open, shoulders bent with years of bending to fear. "Grace," he said softly without lifting his head. "Close the curtain." "He is heading toward the Jenkins farm," she replied. "That is not our concern." She turned slowly. "It is everyone's concern." Her father swallowed. "We must not invite trouble into this house." Grace looked back out the window just as Silas dismounted. Old Mr. Jenkins stepped out onto his porch. His hands shook. His wife stood behind him, clutching her apron. There were no raised voices, no drawn guns. Silas spoke low. Calm. Final. Within minutes, 2 of Crowe's hired men were leading the Jenkins' last 2 horses away. Mr. Jenkins tried to protest. Silas shoved him once, not hard, but hard enough to send the old man collapsing against his own doorframe. Then, as Silas walked to the rain barrel beside the house, he tipped it. The little water they had saved spilled into the dirt. Grace felt her chest burn. When Silas mounted his horse again, his gaze lifted. It found her in the church window. For a long moment, they stared at one another. There was no cruelty in his face, no pleasure, only something cold and buried. Grace did not step back. The wind returned. "He is evil," her father whispered behind her. Grace shook her head. "He is a man, a dangerous one." She watched until he rode away. Then someone should remind him of that. The next morning, half the town was packing wagons. Deputy Aaron Cole stood outside the general store, his tin star catching the weak sunlight. He was young. Too young. Yet his hands looked unsure even when resting at his sides. Grace approached him. "They took everything," she said. "The Jenkins are leaving tonight." Aaron's jaw tightened. "What do you expect me to do?" "You are the law." He let out a sharp breath. "Against Crowe? Against Boone?" "I am one man." Grace stepped closer. "Then be one man who stands." Aaron looked at her like he wanted to believe her. "If you keep challenging them," he warned quietly, "they will come for this church next." Grace lifted her chin. "Let them." 2 days later, Silas returned. This time, he came alone. He tied his stallion outside the saloon and walked in without a word. The town froze again. Grace stood at the church steps, handing out the last of their dried beans to a hungry mother and child. Her heart beat so loud she could hear it in her ears, but before she could think herself out of it, she crossed the street. Gasps followed her. She pushed open the saloon doors. Every conversation died. Silas stood at the bar, massive hands wrapped around a glass of whiskey. The bartender stared at the floor. Grace stepped forward. "Mr. Boone?" Silas did not turn right away. He finished his drink, then slowly faced her. Up close, he was even larger. His shadow swallowed her small frame. "You should not be here," he said in a deep, steady voice. "I am Grace Whitmore," she replied. "Reverend Whitmore's daughter. I know who you are." "Then you know this town is starving." Silas's expression did not change. "That is not my concern." "It should be." He leaned slightly closer. "Well, go home. You serve a man who is choking this valley. I serve the man who owns it." Grace's hands trembled, but she did not step back. "You are stealing from families who have done nothing wrong." Silas's jaw tightened. They owe. They owe because he made them owe. The room felt heavy. For a flicker of a second, something passed through Silas's eyes. Pain. Then it vanished. "You are playing with fire," he warned. "Maybe someone needs to." Silas set his glass down. "Go home, Grace." "Or what?" His voice dropped lower. "Or I forget you are a preacher's daughter." The words sent a chill through her, but she held his gaze. "There is still good in you," she said softly. Silas's face hardened like stone. "You are mistaken." She left the saloon with her legs shaking, but her spirit burning hotter than ever. That night, Dry Hollow did not sleep easy, and neither did Grace. Every creak of the church walls made her jump. Every gust of wind sounded like boots on the porch. Her father paced, whispering prayers under his breath. "Child," he said finally, "you have stirred something." "Good," she answered. The knock came the following evening. It was not loud. It was steady. Grace's stomach dropped. Her father froze. Again the knock. "Reverend Whitmore!" Silas's deep voice called through the door. "By order of Ezekiel Crowe, this property is being claimed for unpaid debt." Grace felt her father's hand tremble against her arm. "We have nothing left," he whispered. Silas spoke again. "Open the door." Grace stepped forward before her father could move. "You will not take this house." Her father looked at her in shock. At the third knock, cracked the frame. "Open it," Silas warned. Grace grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace. The door burst inward under one powerful kick. Silas filled the doorway like a storm. Dust swirled around his boots. "Move," he said. "You will not touch this church." "I am not here for the church." "Then leave." He stepped inside anyway. Grace raised the poker, though her hands shook violently. Silas looked at her weapon, then at her. "You cannot stop me. Try me." For a moment, they simply stared at one another. Then he moved forward to push past her. Fear surged through her chest. "Don't come inside," she breathed. "Please, don't cross this line." The words left her without thinking. Raw, desperate. Silas paused. Something in her voice hit him hard. His jaw clenched. "I have orders. And I have faith." He gently but firmly took the poker from her grip and set it aside. He did not hurt her. He simply began removing furniture. Chairs, tables, her mother's old rocking chair. Each item carried out like it meant nothing. Grace followed him outside, tears burning her eyes. You are tearing apart people who have already lost everything. He did not answer. When he stepped back toward the doorway again, she blocked him once more. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Don't come inside again. There is nothing left to take. Silas looked down at her. Up close, she could see a scar running along his collarbone, a faded bruise near his jaw. Old wounds that told stories no one asked about. You should not have challenged me, he said quietly. Maybe you should not have listened to him. For a heartbeat, his expression shifted. Then, heavy hoofbeats echoed from the road. Crowe's riders approached. Silas glanced toward them, then back at Grace. You have made this worse, he murmured. Crowe himself rode into view, thin and sharp-eyed, smile cold as winter. Well done, Boone, Crowe called. Clear it out. Silas did not move. Crowe's gaze shifted to Grace. So this is the preacher's girl who thinks she is brave. Grace stepped closer to Silas without meaning to. Crowe smirked. Finish it. Silas stood still. The wind screamed louder, but Grace felt her heart pounding against her ribs. She looked up at the giant cowboy. Don't, she whispered. And for the first time, Silas Boone looked like a man caught between chains and something far more dangerous. Choice. Crowe's smile faded when Silas did not move. The riders behind him shifted in their saddles. The town watched from doorways and windows, silent and afraid. I gave you an order, Crowe said calmly. Silas kept his eyes on Grace. She could feel the heat of him beside her, the tension in his body, the war happening behind those pale eyes. Finish it, Crowe repeated. Silas finally stepped forward. Grace's breath caught. He walked past her, not toward her father, toward the church doors. He placed his massive hand against the wood. Then he pushed them closed instead of open. And the sound echoed across the street. Crowe's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Silas turned slowly. They have nothing left. That is not your concern. Silas's jaw flexed. The debt is paid in full. They will leave by morning. Grace felt the world tilt. Crowe let out a soft laugh that held no humor. Since when do you decide what is paid? Silas stepped down from the porch. He stood tall, but there was something different in the way he held himself now. Less like a weapon, more like a wall. They leave by morning, he repeated. Crowe studied him for a long moment. Then his gaze shifted to Grace. Interesting, he murmured. Very interesting. He tipped his hat slightly. One night, Reverend. At sunrise, I expect this property empty. With that, he turned his horse and rode off, his men following. At the town slowly exhaled. Grace's knees felt weak. Her father stepped outside, pale and shaken. You defied him, he whispered to Silas. Silas did not look at him. He looked at Grace. You have until sunrise, he said quietly. After that, I cannot protect you. Why? She asked. He hesitated. Then he walked away without answering. That night, the church was heavy with silence. Candles burned low. Boxes were half-packed. Reverend Whitmore sat in the front pew, face buried in his hands. Grace stood near the altar, staring at the wooden cross hanging above it. You should not have angered Crowe, her father said softly. He is already angry, she replied. He owns the water. He owns this land. Then why are you so afraid of him? Her father's shoulders shook. There are things you do not know, he whispered. But Grace turned toward him. Then tell me. He lifted his head slowly. I owe him more than money. Her stomach tightened. What does that mean? Years ago, during a brutal winter, her mother had fallen ill. Medicine cost more than they had. Crowe had offered help, a loan, generous terms. But nothing Crowe offered was ever generous. When her mother died anyway, the debt remained. And Crowe had returned, not asking for money, but obedience. Her father had signed papers he never read fully. Land agreements, water access rights, clauses buried in pages of legal words. The church land had slowly become Crowe's leverage over the town. "You gave him power over everyone," Grace whispered. "I was trying to save your mother. And now you are letting him destroy us." Her father wept quietly. Grace felt anger and sorrow twist inside her chest. After midnight, there was another knock. Not loud, not forceful. Just one. Grace's heart jumped. She opened the church door before her father could stop her. Silas stood there alone. Moonlight cut across his face, making him look carved from shadow. "You should not be here," she said. "You should not have spoken to Crowe like that," he replied. "Yet here you are." He stepped inside slowly. The church felt smaller with him in it. Her father rose from the pew. "We are leaving at dawn." "You should leave tonight," Silas said. "And go where?" Grace asked. "Every well belongs to him." Silas did not answer. He walked down the aisle, boots echoing softly. Grace followed. "You stood against him," she said. "Why?" He stopped near the altar. "I was not always his man," he said quietly. She waited. 8 years ago, I worked the river crossings north of here. Crowe's shipments moved through that route. One night, a wagon burned. 2 men died. Grace's breath slowed. Crowe said I was responsible, said my carelessness cost him. He had witnesses, papers. He offered me a choice: prison or work off the debt. And you believed him? I believed I had no other path. Grace stepped closer. And now? Silas looked at the cross above the altar. Now I am not sure the debt was ever real. Silence filled the space between them. You are stronger than him, she said. He let out a low breath. Strength is not the same as freedom. Her heart beat faster. Then take your freedom. He looked down at her. You do not understand what Crowe will do. Then let him try. Silas's hand reached out without thinking. It brushed her wrist. The touch sent a sharp wave through her body. She did not step back. His fingers were rough, warm, careful. He seemed to realize what he had done and quickly pulled away. You should fear me, he said. I do not. You should. I do not. Her voice trembled, but not from fear. The air between them felt charged, heavy, too close. Grace, he said softly, almost like a warning. She stepped nearer anyway. You are not his weapon, she whispered. He swallowed. You do not know what I have done. Then change what you will do. Her hand lifted slowly. It touched his chest. She could feel his heart beating beneath his shirt. Fast, hard. His breath grew uneven. This is wrong, he said. Is it? You are the preacher's daughter. And you are not a monster. The words hung between them. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, something had shifted. Desire, fear, hunger, conflict, all at once. Grace, he said again, voice rougher now. She stepped even closer, her body almost against his massive frame. Don't come inside me, she whispered suddenly, not even fully understanding why she said it. Don't cross that line. The words were soft, honest, fragile. Silas froze. His hands hovered at her waist. The church was silent except for their breathing. He looked down at her like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. If I cross it, he said quietly. There is no turning back. Her heart pounded so loud she thought it might burst. Then do not cross it, she said. But she did not step away, and neither did he. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Storm clouds gathered over Dry Hollow. Inside the small wooden church, Grace felt the world narrowing to the space between her and the giant cowboy. Silas's hand moved to her cheek, gentle, careful. His thumb brushed her skin like he feared she might break. You deserve better than me, he said. Then become better. His jaw tightened. The war inside him raged again. Duty, desire, guilt, hope. Finally, he stepped back. Just one step, but it felt like miles. You leave tonight, he said. I will hold Crowe off as long as I can. And you? I settle my debt. Before she could answer, gunshots cracked outside. Both of them turned toward the door. Voices shouted. Crowe had not waited for sunrise. Silas's face hardened instantly. Stay inside, he ordered. He drew his revolver. Grace grabbed his arm. Do not die for him. I am not, he said. Then he stepped out into the storm. Gunfire split the night like tearing cloth. Grace ran to the church doorway despite Silas's command. Rain had begun to fall, cold and sharp, turning the dirt street into mud beneath the pounding hooves of Crowe's riders. Lantern light flickered wildly. Shadows jumped across buildings. Silas stood in the middle of the street alone. He did not hide behind barrels. He did not duck for cover. He stood tall, revolver steady, while like a wall planted between Crowe and the church. Crowe rode forward through the rain, coat slick against his thin frame, eyes burning with fury. You forget your place, Crowe shouted. Silas fired first. One of Crowe's men dropped from his saddle. Chaos erupted. Deputy Aaron Cole burst from the general store with his rifle. 2 miners followed him. Then another man. Then another. Dry Hollow had been afraid for years. But fear, when pushed too far, becomes anger. And tonight, anger had teeth. Grace watched through the rain as Silas moved like a storm given flesh. He did not waste bullets. He did not hesitate. Every shot was clean, every movement purposeful. Crowe aimed straight for him. The bullet struck Silas high in the shoulder. Grace screamed. He staggered but did not fall. Instead, he charged. But he slammed into Crowe's horse, dragging the man from the saddle. They hit the mud hard. Crowe scrambled for his pistol, but Silas was faster. He pinned Crowe down, one massive hand at his collar. It was never a debt, Silas growled. You made me believe it. Crowe spat blood and rain. You were nothing before me. Silas's jaw tightened. I was a man. Crowe reached again for his gun. Another shot rang out. Deputy Aaron had fired. The pistol flew from Crowe's hand. Silas rose slowly, blood soaking his shirt, rain mixing with it, and running down his chest. Crowe tried to crawl away. The townspeople surrounded him. For the first time in years, Ezekiel Crowe looked small. Aaron stepped forward and kicked Crowe onto his back. You are under arrest. Crowe laughed weakly. You think this changes anything? But the water still belongs to me. It does not, a voice answered. Grace's father stepped into the rain, clutching a stack of papers above his head. In your hurry to control us, Reverend Whitmore shouted, you forgot that copies of every contract were filed with the county. Grace stared at him. Her father's voice no longer trembled. The clauses are illegal, he continued. The dam is under dispute. The land was never truly yours. Crowe's face drained of color. You signed it, Crowe hissed. I signed under threat, the preacher said. And tonight, I confess it, before this town. Silence fell, except for the rain. Aaron pulled Crowe to his feet and snapped iron cuffs around his wrists. The riders who remained threw down their weapons. It was over. Grace ran through the mud to Silas. He was on one knee now, breathing hard, the blood still seeping from his wound. She dropped beside him. You are hurt, she whispered. It will hold, he answered, though his voice was weak. She pressed her hands against his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. You could have left, she said. You could have ridden away. He looked at her through rain-soaked lashes. And let him take you? Her breath caught. The storm softened around them. Aaron and the townspeople dragged Crowe toward the jail. Lanterns glowed warmer now. Faces looked different, lighter. Grace helped Silas to his feet. He swayed, but he did not fall. Inside the church, she guided him to the front pew. Her father brought clean cloth and water. For the first time, the preacher looked directly at the giant cowboy. You stood for us, he said quietly. Silas met his gaze. I stood for myself. Grace cleaned the wound carefully. He winced, but did not complain. You said crossing that line meant no turning back, she murmured. He studied her face. And I crossed it, he said. You chose, she corrected. He gave a faint, tired smile. Outside, the rain grew steady and strong. It poured over Dry Hollow, soaking the thirsty earth. By morning, the dust that had covered the town for years had settled into clean mud. The river upstream swelled against the dam. County officials arrived 3 days later. Crowe's contracts were declared void. The dam was seized. Water rights returned to the valley. Men worked together to open the gates. When the first rush of water flowed freely down the riverbed again, people wept openly. Dry Hollow breathed for the first time in years. Silas healed slowly. The bullet had missed bone, but the wound ran deep. Grace visited him every day in the small room above the saloon where he stayed while recovering. She brought broth, clean bandages, quiet company. The town no longer looked at him with fear. They nodded when he passed. Some even thanked him, but he still carried guilt in his eyes. One evening, as the sun dipped low over green fields that were beginning to show life again, he stood outside the church. Grace joined him. The air smelled fresh, clean. You could leave now, she said gently. No one would stop you. He looked out over the valley. I thought freedom would feel louder, he admitted. She smiled softly. Sometimes it feels quiet. He turned to her. I nearly became the monster he wanted. But you did not. I hurt people. You saved more. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. I do not deserve you, he said. She stepped closer. This is not about deserving, she answered. It is about choosing. He reached for her slowly this time, not with hunger, not with conflict, but with certainty. His hand rested at her waist. Her heart beat steady, not frantic. Do you still fear I will cross lines I should not? He asked quietly. She shook her head. No. And if I do? Then it will be because I walked there with you. The wind moved softly around them. No dust, no screams, just peace. He bent his head and kissed her gently. Not rushed, not stolen. Chosen. Months later, Dry Hollow changed its name. The townspeople voted together in the church. They called it Clear River. The fields turned green again. Wells filled. Children played in the street without fear. Deputy Aaron became sheriff. Reverend Whitmore preached with a stronger voice. and Silas Boone no longer rode into town as a threat. He rode beside Grace on quiet evenings, teaching boys how to mend fences and helping farmers rebuild barns he once tore down. On a small hill behind the church, they built a new wooden sign. It did not carry Crowe's name. It carried the town's. Grace stood beside Silas as he hammered the last nail in place. She looked up at him. "You once said strength is not freedom." He nodded. "I was wrong," he said softly. "Strength is choosing who you stand for." She slipped her hand into his. "And who do you stand for now?" He looked at her. "For you, for this town, for myself." The river flowed strong behind them. The wind no longer screamed, and the giant cowboy who once carried chains finally learned how to carry love instead.